Happy Scientist podcast. Each episode is designed to make you more focused, more productive, and more satisfied in the lab. You can find us online at bitesizebio.com/happyscientist. Your hosts are Kenneth Vogt, founder of the executive coaching firm Vera Claritas, and Dr. Nick Oswald, PhD, bioscientist, and founder of Bitesize Bio.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Happy Scientist podcast. This, of course, is the place to be if you want to become a happier, healthier, and more productive scientist. I'm Nick Oswald, the founder of bitesizebio.com, and today we will be drawing on the wisdom of Mr. Kenneth Vogt, the Bitesize Bio team coach, and the founder of the executive mentoring company, Vera Claritas. Today, and in all other Happy Scientist podcast episodes, you get to benefit from Ken's Yoda-like words of wisdom to help you increase your performance, enjoyment, and success in the lab. We all say that we want a better work-life balance, but in this episode, Ken has something for you, something better than a work-life balance. Okay, Ken, explain, what is that?
Okay. Well, we gotta start with this notion of balance. Yeah, I think a lot of folks, they have these fond memories of back when they used to have life in balance, and maybe they gotta go way back to like preschool. But the fact is, what it was a simpler time. You probably didn't actually have anything in balance, and you might say, well, what do you mean by that? Well, I guess it starts with, well, what is balance? If we were to look a definition up for that, we'd understand it is to keep or put something in a steady position. Steady position. Does life look like that? Does your life look like that? Has it ever been steady? Has it ever been this stationary, static thing? Well, no, life doesn't work like that. And I don't just mean human life doesn't work like that. I mean, y'all are bioscientists. You're looking at life all the time, and it is in constant motion. It's constantly changing. So this notion of being in balance is a flawed assumption right from the beginning. Now, granted, it's seeking something that looks very desirable. We would like to feel like everything is in its proper place and that everything's getting the attention it's due. And of course, those are good things. And you want to accomplish your work and you want to move up in your career, but you'd also like to be at that kid's recital or soccer game, or you'd like to be there for your significant other. And there is the whole thing about sickness and health. You want to be there with that cup of chicken soup and that warm blanket sometimes, because that's what the moment calls for. The problem is if you have other things going on in your world that make it seem like that's impossible, well, then you're never going to have that satisfaction of this thing that has been labeled work-life balance. So the question then is, how do you do this in a dynamic rather than static environment? What are the things that you have to put into their proper place? So we're going to look at a couple of different things. First off, let's look at the characteristics of work. There's a lot of things going on there that you have to, as it were, balance, that you have to take into consideration. And even only if it's compared to other things that have to do with work. For instance, often you have priorities that are set by others. You don't even get to set them. Your boss sets your priorities, or your boss's boss, or whoever gave you the grant, or there's all of these constituencies that have a voice in telling you what your priorities are. And you can't ignore that. Then you have the situation of shifting priorities. Even if you got the piece with where all these priorities came from, they don't ever sit still, and they keep changing. And again, There's nothing about any of this that's improper. It's just recognizing that's how the work world works. Another thing you have is, regardless of what your priorities are, you get interrupted. And you get interrupted for things that are urgent rather than important. Because let's face it, interruptions are about the level of urgency of a matter, not its importance. And you know, if you're going along and you're working away and then you feel a mosquito bite your ankle, well, it's not terribly important, but it's very urgent. You don't get that mosquito now, you're not going to get it. Now, maybe you bioscientists have a different view of that, and you're thinking, oh, who knows what disease I'm being given by this mosquito. But then, there is the statistical likelihood of it giving you a disease that also adds to how important this interruption is. But, a lot of interruptions are like that. They're just mosquito bites. But they're there, and we can't deny that they happen. Another thing that you have to take into consideration is, okay, let's say I have priorities, but some of them have a long-term view and some of them have a short-term view. And so you've got to weigh those against each other. And when is it critical to give attention to one over another? When is it valuable to give attention to one over another? Because, those are slightly different ways of looking at it. Another thing that can happen is this valuable for me, this particular task, or is it beneficial only to somebody else? Now, in some ways, you might look at that and go, well, I'm not going to be pushed around by other people. Then again, benefiting certain people could be very valuable in your career and very worthwhile. And these are people that, they know how to return a favor. So you can't necessarily look at it and say, well, it's not all about me, so it's not good. On the other hand, you can waste a lot of time serving other people that couldn't care less. And actually, they don't even find the service to be that valuable. So, you need to look at those things too. Another thing I think is kind of peculiar to bioscientists, not entirely so, but is more likely to be something to think about. Is something a sure thing that I'm putting effort into, or is something a moonshot? Something that I don't know if it's going to work out, but boy, if it does, it'll be amazing. You've got that going on in your world, and if you only ever give your attention to sure things, it's not like you're going to fail in life or in your career at that, but it's not going to be very exciting. But there are some other things that, if you got attached to them, could really change your world. Now, granted, they could change your world for the negative too. If you sign up for a stinker and it bombs, that doesn't help. But if there's anything I learned from the .com world, failure is not a problem. You can fail. In fact, you can fail multiple times. The question will be, did you learn from that failure? And did it open your eyes to new possibilities? So again, this is all part of the stuff that you balance when it comes to your work. The thing is, work isn't the only thing going on in your world. So let's also talk about the characteristics of life. The things that happen in your life that also need some attention at times and need some prioritization at times. So an obvious big one at the top of that is relationships. And relationships, I'm not just talking about romantic relationships. They're, relationship with a spouse that, this has become a long-term commitment at that point. There's a relationship with your children. Boy, is that a long-term commitment. There's a relationship with your parents. There's a relationship with friends, especially friends you've had for a long time. Those are all things you have to weigh, and they could fall by the wayside if you got overly caught up in work, for instance. Now, when I say overly caught up, to really put that in its proper perspective, of course you do want to be caught up in your work at times. That's beneficial. That means you're giving it your all. But being overly caught up Work is to benefit your life. If there is no life left to benefit, what's the point? you know, so you don't want to lose relationships because of work. Now, another thing that happens in life is you have obligations. There are just some things that you've got to do, and whether they're legal obligations or they're moral obligations or they're whatever weight you put behind it. If you consider it an obligation, obviously it matters to you. It's going to bother you if you don't live up to your obligations. So, it's another thing to take into consideration. Another thing that happens in life is you make plans. There's things you want to do. There's time you want to spend in certain ways, and it's going to matter if you don't give attention to that. And I mean, plans may be things that are not, call them critical. You plan to go on vacation. Well, the world isn't going to end if you don't go on vacation. If you don't go on vacation, it might end if your family doesn't go on vacation. You got to decide what matters there. But just, I mean, you plan to go to the gym. You plan to eat healthier. There's a lot of things you might plan for, and that is part of what's going on in your life. Then there's the thing that I'll call preferences. This stuff you want to do. You want to spend more time playing piano. You want to spend more time in the garden. You want to, things you just like to do. I want to spend more time in cooking in the kitchen. Great. But if you don't give attention to that, it probably won't happen. You got a busy enough life that it could fall by the wayside unless it gets some attention. And finally, there's an area I'll call self-care. And self-care could mean many things. And it comes down to realizing what you yourself need. If you realize I have got to take a minute, and watch the sunset. I've got to meditate. I've got to get some sleep. I gotta get some alone time away from them noisy kids. I have got to have a moment where I can read a magazine that's about something I like instead of something I have to read. You know, it all comes down to what you realize is what you're going to need to recharge your own batteries. So here we've listed off all this stuff, and by now you're probably going, well, that's just that's all impossible. I can't do all of that. Why did I ever think I could sign up for that? I have failed before I can even begin. Well, and it's the answer there isn't to try and balance it. You're gonna have a very difficult time balancing all that, and it's possible that some people that appear to do that they seem to be balanced all the time. And I will submit to you that there's two types of people like that. One type is a person that is so uptight and so locked down, so wired in that yes, they can account for every minute of the day, and there's a place for everything and everything in its place, and you can look at that and go, wow, do I want to be that person? And I bet you 90% of you are going, wow, I do not want to be that person. That is a price that is just too high. And I remember when my son was born. Now this is 32, 33 years ago. And my wife is going to have a C-section. It's an emergency C-section. It wasn't planned. There's something that was going on that needed to happen. And so I'm in the locker room with the doctor, and we're changing into clothes to be there because I'm going to be there for this. So they want you to put on a gown and all that. And this guy pulls off his shirt, and I'm looking at him and I'm going, he's built like an Olympic athlete. It made sense to me when I thought about it, because here was a doctor that was just super wired in. I mean, this guy was on top of every detail, which sounds like something you want in a doctor. While we're sitting there, we hear a call over the PA. Dr. Smith, come to cardiology, and it's like, oh no. And I'm thinking, here's my my obstetric, what do you want to call it? My wife's obstetrician surgeon, who's going to now have to leave to deal with somebody who's obviously dying. He's being called to cardiac, to cardio care, and and he didn't. He got on the phone. He told us to have whoever's on call there handle it. Hung up, and then came back and went and did my thing, because he had an answer for everything that could be done. And of course, everything went fine. His son was born fine, although he wasn't real happy to be here at that moment. There was the look on his face said, "Well, I wasn't ready for this." Well, whose idea was this? Well, it was this doctor who he thought it had to be. It was his notion. And I thought, man, when I looked back at all that, I thought about how hard his life must be, what his wife must think about him, and what his kids must think about him. And that's a hard way to be. So, anyway, that is a overachiever's way of approaching balance, right? I'm not even knocking it. He's a good man who got a lot done and all that. But what a cost. Was it worth it? I don't know. I wouldn't say. Now, the second kind of person you see balancing it all is a politician, and they are putting up a good front. They are making it look like they have a grip on everything. But do they really? And, we've seen people like that to just, at some point, they just crumble. They all, the facade falls down and everything comes apart. And I know nobody wants to be that. It's a nightmare. So, okay, if those are the only two options you got, a lot of folks would be going, I don't think I'm going to sign up for either option. So, you don't have to do this. You can do it different. So some of the things you have to be willing to do then is you got to forget about perfection. Perfection is not the goal. It's because perfection is just an idea about what is perfect. It's nothing to do with what is actually perfect. Sometimes if you look at a plant and you see a flower and it just looks so perfect. Yeah, except it looked different last week and it looked different next week. Was it imperfect before and after? It's like, no, it was at the stage it was at and it was fine. And so, and our perspective is not always the most accurate. And even a really considered perspective is still lacking some knowledge and some information. So if you could just forget about perfection, this notion of balance becomes not quite as important. Another thing is, as we mentioned, life happens in motion. So things will keep moving. If it's not perfect this moment, if it's not in balance at this moment, you know what? Next moment's coming. And by the way, if it's perfect right now, next moment's coming. So it's even if you achieved some kind of miraculous balance, you're not going to be able to hang on to it. And then you're going to suffer because you're going to beat yourself up about it. And what's to be gained from that? Self-hatred is not getting you anywhere. And it never will. It's never going to fix any real problems. So it's better to just forego that entirely. So I've noted a couple times that we're talking to bioscientists here, and if there's anybody that knows how to keep things alive, keep them alive, it's you. You're the ones. So, how do you keep you alive? Well, use the same thing you would use in the lab. So I'm gonna tick off a few things that you ought to consider. So first off, you create conditions that are supportive of life, and that differs from organism to organism, and that differs for circumstance to circumstance. What do you need? In some cases, you need time and you need quiet. In other cases, you need action and you need people around, and you need, you're gonna create the right environment for the right things you want to accomplish at the right times you need to accomplish them. That is a far better thing to do than to try and focus on some kind of fantasy of balance. The next thing you need to do is you recognize that things don't stay the same, and things can go wrong. I mean, they can go really wrong if you let them go too far. So what you need to do is set up feedback loops. Find if there's something important that you want to accomplish in your world, make sure that you're constantly getting reports back on it. You're getting references back on it. And whatever that is, whether it's uh, you want to hear your kid in school, you ought to be asking them on a regular basis, how are they doing in their classes? And when you hear a class is hard for them, well, that's a topic you want to keep asking about. You want to make sure they're up to date on, see if they need any help. Or if it's something to do with your spouse and what's happening in their work. If there's a topic there that is bothering them, you're going to want to hear about it because they're going to want to tell you about it. They're going to want to share it. They're going to want to have some support. And that support might come in just to having a listening ear. It's not like you have to solve their problem for them, but um, just somebody that cares can make a big difference. Another thing you can do is you can collect data about whatever it is that's important to you, and then you can derive information from that data. So what do I mean by that? Data is just kind of raw facts. They're just there. Information is attaching some value to those facts, or seeing what's important. I can give you a number that is the temperature of something, and it may or may not matter to you. It may not mean anything to you. But in certain things, one temperature is going to mean my whole culture is dead, or it's fine, and I might not know the difference, but you will, because it's information to you. To me, it was just data. So make sure that collect data, but then make sure you turn it into information that you can use. And then finally, once you have information, well, you can make decisions. And you can make adjustments as need be. So you got to engage enough with the things that are important to make sure that you do that. You engage enough to get data. You engage enough to to derive information about that data, and you engage enough to make decisions on that information, and you engage enough to make adjustments based on your decisions, that you'll actually do something. At the end of the day, it's not just thinking about it, but it's the things you do. And sometimes the things you do will be small. It just, but it shows your level of commitment. And if you keep doing that, you will realize that, what? I'm in harmony. That's the thing you're seeking here, is you're seeking harmony. Harmony is way better than balance. Harmony is something that happens in action. It happens in motion. And it often happens with other people. There's so many benefits there. And you never hear anybody hear about a harmonious situation and go, well, boy, did I hate that was harmonious. It's always good. It always comes out better for you. And this notion of being in balance, whenever you hear somebody's in balance on something, don't you immediately find it to be suspect? Really? Are they really in balance? And are they going to stay that way even if they are? Whereas harmony sounds like it's a mode of being. It's not just a momentary thing. So that's what I'm recommending to you today. So I will let you weigh in, Nick.
Wow. Okay. That is a kind of one to get your head around, but I think the conclusion of what you're talking about is harmony. That really helps because you can get a sense of what that means, to live your life like that, rather than seeking to force some sort of not arbitrary balance. It's almost a culturally defined balance in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Although one thing that people are often talking about when they say, they want a better balance, especially work-life balance, is that they want to have more freedom, maybe.
Right.
More time, or more freedom to do the things that they want to do. I guess so. That's one aspect that struck me. A couple of other things that I wrote down while you were going through this is one way to look at this, I think, is it's rather than trying to assert a balance, it's about going with the flow kind of thing, where you it's a mix between going with the flow. It's a balance between going with the flow and but also choosing parameters that of what matters to you and sticking to them. Would that be true?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and it's up to you to decide what those things are.
Yeah. Okay. So then you're looking at, if you're looking at how to practically do this, you're going to the two qualities you're going to have to adopt is one, a flexibility, to be to stop trying to push for that balance, to kind of be flexible with what's happening, but also be assertive that when the parameters you set get hit, then you don't allow them to, you don't allow it to go so far.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of this comes down to how hard are you on yourself? Are you very judgmental of yourself? If you can give yourself a little more breathing room, you can get more done. I'm not saying to blow it all off. Like, who cares? Who cares if I live up to any ideals? Well, no. If you've got ideals and they're important to you, by all means, strive to live up to them. But understand that it's a matter of striving, not a matter of completing. Because and you're not all going to be Buddha or Christ. Not everybody can do that. But if you're making an effort in that direction, that's still quite valuable, and it's still quite worthwhile, and still can be quite satisfying.
It's interesting because I actually wrote this at the top of the page and then I crossed it out because I thought this is not it, but it might be because, or it's a perspective anyway, that when you talk about looking for balance in the schedule sort of thing, actually what you're looking for balance in is your mind and
Sure.
is the way that you think about
Well,
things.
yeah, and you may have some heroes that are in that, that are, call them secular heroes, people that you really look up to, and they might be people personally, and you think, man, I want to be just like Dr. So-and-so. Well, okay, maybe that's not a bad aspiration, but can you be like Dr. So-and-so? Or are they really an exceptional person that has some resources you just don't have? You can set the bar too high for yourself. Well, we all did this. We're in first grade and we want to be just like our first grade teacher. Well, yeah, but they're an adult and you're 6. There's only so much you can do, right? And it's fine. Be a great 6-year-old if that's what you are.
That's interesting though, because one of the things, especially if you're a high achiever, one of the things you're kind of told, programmed, you strive sort of thing not to do is to set limits on yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, well, but look at that. Maybe you're setting the limit. You're only going to be as good as Dr. So-and-so. Maybe you could be greater than that. So amazing.
Maybe interesting that one, the comparison thing is an interesting one as well, though, because I know for me, I'm always, I would love to have more self-discipline, right? I don't, and it's kind of something I kind of beat myself up a bit about, is that if only I had more discipline, then I could do X. But maybe, as you're saying, that's almost limiting, because, and what it's stopping me doing is looking for another way to get the same result.
Right. You can self-discipline sometimes gets executed as somebody who's just entirely rigid, that then they have no flexibility at all. They can't change with circumstances. They can't accept new data, and those are all bad things. So,
I guess though, but not using, it's not necessarily that the self-discipline is the, it's just an example of something where it's something I see. I want to get an end result that the self-discipline would give me, but if I stick to the to thinking that that, for example, if I had more self-discipline, then that would be have a more balanced life. And so I need to push myself to have more self-discipline, which is actually not natural for me.
Right.
And by doing that, I don't give myself the space to look for the other another solution to get the same result, if you see what I mean, to get the
Yeah.
same perceived balance. I kind of getting the edge of something here, actually. I'm trying to understand this as much as the people listening, because that was one of your not cryptic ones. It's semi-cryptic, but I'm getting the edge of something where it's kind of more about being in balance with yourself.
Yeah.
And then allowing and then
Balance is self-defined. I don't know why. I just had this song from Queens of the Stone Age running through my head. Go with the flow. and go with the flow could sound very, just lazy. Like, you know what? I'm not gonna make any choices. I'm just gonna let things just happen. And that's not what I mean. It's like you're in an active river and you're moving down it. Now go with the flow. It's dynamic. It's happening. It, but you could use that power to push you in the right direction, or in the direction that's going to work. Let's put it that way. So don't make it
Well,
right or wrong.
having spent 3 days on a river in the summer paddling, we were going with the flow, but it was a lot of work, and so you can't fight
Imagine if
against
you
the
hadn't
flow.
gone with the flow.
But that's what I mean. That's what I mean. It's not a lazy thing at all.
Yeah.
And it's not an inactive thing either.
Mm-hmm.
It's it's continually reassessing the situation, but being relaxed with where it is, and then just making adjustment. So yeah, that's an interesting one. The river, go with the flow like that.
Yeah, boy, we need to have an episode on freedom and differentiate it from the hippy dippy freedom.
Okay. I mean, as I said, this is one of the ones that I can't grasp immediately what the whole of what you're saying. So it might be if other people are the same, then it might be that this is a re-listen one, or it might be that we have to cover this in a different angle.
Yeah, well, really and actually, I think we have covered it in the past in pieces, but I wanted to have a specific just about this episode. Also, there's a couple references. There's an article that'll be in the show notes that talks about perfectionism. That's titled "Perfectionism is Setting the Bar Too Low." So it's worth thinking about. And of course, always go back to episode 20, the multitasking myth. It is not the answer to balance, my friends. And if you're falling victim to that, by all means, listen to that episode again. And it's not a hard one to understand like this. It's based on a Stanford study. It's it's pretty fact-based.
Yeah. Okay. So that's interesting. So maybe go back to episode 20. Maybe I will go back to episode 20, listen to that, and then come back and listen to this and see if I can get more. But again, I did say at the top of this that you were it was your Yoda-like wisdom, and sometimes Yoda takes some deciphering. So this is one of those, I would say. But it doesn't mean that you can't get something at even the first pass I have. It certainly makes you think and try and figure out for yourself that whole work-life balance thing, for example, is not as simple as it's made out to be, and actually the simplification is maybe what makes it unattainable.
Right.
So
in fact, seek harmony. It is accessible to you. It's available. Go get it.
Okay, I thought that was going to be a bit more Yoda-like, but that wasn't too bad. Okay. Yeah, I think this is one where we need to do some homework on, well, the people who are listening to this and myself. So we might come back to this topic or another angle on it in the future again, if I can figure out where where my understanding got to, and we can work from there. Okay, wow, that was a head melter, as we would say here. Okay. Okay, but yeah, definitely. Thank you again, Ken, though. That's just another, those are the ones that normally will end up being of the most benefit once you decipher them, in my experience. So again, as Ken said, podcast 20 would be a good one to cross-reference with this one. And so would episodes 1 to 9. They're good to cross-reference with all of them. That's where you find the foundational principles, human needs, core sets, charisma factors, stuff like that really it gives you a framework, gives you some parameters actually, which is something Ken mentioned in this podcast. And yeah, I think that you could find those very helpful. Again, maybe I'll go and listen to those again as well. If you want to go back and look through the episodes any episodes that you've missed, you can see those at bitesizebio.com/The Happy Scientist. And if you want to connect with us, we are at facebook.com/The Happy Scientist Club. Join us there and say hello. So that just leaves me to say thanks again, Ken, for another, I'm not going to say illuminating, that was kind of slightly pulling back the curtain, that one. There's a little chink of light there. And but yeah, definitely it's going to be helpful once it's digested. So again, thanks again for Ken for taking the time to put that together and deliver it. And we will see you all again for the next episode.
Bye.
The Happy Scientist is brought to you by Bitesize Bio, your mentor in the lab. Bitesize Bio features thousands of articles and webinars contributed by hundreds of PhD scientists and scientific companies who freely offer their hard-won wisdom and solutions to the Bitesize Bio community.